On our second date, my now husband, Henry, and I stood in the line at Jimmy John's downtown and bonded over our shared distaste of mayonnaise. Except he explained it's not just mayonnaise for him, it's actually like any foods with a white, creamy, ambiguous consistency, which includes cottage cheese and cream cheese and Alfredo sauce and yogurt. And he doesn't want to look at it or touch it or smell it or be anywhere near it. And I only mention this because 4 years later and 2 kids later, our youngest child will only eat yogurt. Right? It's like karma or something. And not only that, she doesn't want to eat it from the container. It needs to be transferred into a special bowl, the way that you scoop stinky cat food, like out of the tin and into a special dish. And it needs to be mixed with an allergy medicine that you won't chew. And so it has to be sort of like secretly melted in and mixed in. And I have to say, for 4 years, Henry has done this yogurt scooping and mixing and delivering without puking every day, every morning for 4 years. That is love. That is love. And there is a word used in this week's Torah portion to describe a relationship, maybe the most important relationship in the Jewish lexicon. And I've already said it. And it's the first time we hear it in the Torah referring to a relationship between 2 adults. And the word is love. The word is love, which is just, it's sort of an interesting observation. Adam and Eve, like the word love doesn't appear to describe their relationship. Abraham and Sarah, they had an epic relationship, but the word love never appears. And so this week in the Torah portion, we see for the first time that Isaac brought Rebekah into his tent that had been his mother's, v'yahaveha, and he loved her. And so our commentary writers over the years have actually paid a lot of attention to this love between Isaac and Rebekah. I actually think it's really complicated. So I want to take the opportunity that this word appearing in our Parsha presents to widen the lens and just explore a little bit today what is unique about how Judaism understands love. Because it is undeniably a central Jewish concept, obviously among with many other words and concepts, but it is a big one. And it appears hundreds of times in the Torah and Jewish liturgy and writings after this point. And in the words of Rabbi Shai Held, Judaism is about love. Thank you. Great. Shabbat shalom. Okay. And importantly, the Torah does not give us mitzvot, spiritual work to do. Mitzvah is that sort of spiritual behavior given by God in the Torah, does not give us spiritual work to do that we would do anyway on our own. So for example, like the Torah doesn't need to give a mitzvah telling parents to love their children because generally speaking, this is not a thing that needs to be taught, right? You might need to learn how to sleep train. You might need to learn about nutrition. But as far as just basic parental love, this is something that we assume is baked into the relationship. Parental love is expressed in a million concrete ways the Torah could never anticipate or recommend. It is Henry with the yogurt and any other number of, inconvenient, emotionally challenging, and sometimes disgusting things that parents don't need to be told for their, to do for their children. So, if certain kinds of love are assumed and don't need to be told, then what kinds of love do require reminding? Right? If you are God and you are going to transmit to the Jewish people a list of ways to love, people to love, things to love, approaches toward love that are not intuitive, so like importantly that are going to help you build a holy, moral society and are not intuitive, what might need to be in the Torah? What would you expect to see? This is an actual question I have for you, because I know Ben doesn't mind when we do a little bit of asking, including be mitzvah, like adults here. All right, wait, I'm sorry. Put your strangers, to love strangers. Why should that be? Why should that need to be told? Thank you. I'm just going to repeat exactly what you said, because we often fear people who are not familiar to us. And so it would not be intuitive to love them. And in fact, you are right. We're going to get there. Ve'ahavta et hager is a mitzvah in the Torah. You will love the stranger. What else? Ooh, those who wrong you. Oh, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Okay, what else? I mean, it seems obvious, right? So it seems obvious that loving those who wrong you should actually be in the Torah. Like, how does that work? What does that look like? How do you not sort of, debase and humiliate yourself while loving somebody who has hurt you? There is Jewish wisdom around that. But thank you for saying that. Another one? Any kids? What kind of love might not be intuitive, but it's really important? Ooh, loving yourself. Thank you for saying that. On our morning minyan the other day, I think like 3 or 4 different adults said the exact same thing. They said that's one of the hardest things to do. Thank you for saying that. What were you going to say in the back?
Oh, like stepchildren or children that come to you that are maybe not your biological children.
Okay, like not your biological children. And that's sort of, it doesn't exactly flow into strangers, but it's sort of like nuclear family. It doesn't actually, like we don't mostly have to instruct that. But people who aren't exactly in the nuclear family or could get adopted into the nuclear family in any way, like, yes, sure, thank you. So all of this and more is part of the Jewish conversation around love. And I wanted to just mention a few critical, big ticket, overarching concepts in love, in the Torah, that this week's Torah portion brings up for us. And so Maimonides, who is otherwise known as Rambam, he's a great medieval Spanish philosopher, and he identified a few of these kind of big categories that form the backbone of the Jewish relationship with love, but I would argue are the whole picture, are the whole story. If you understand this, you understand the Jewish tradition. And so the first, he says, is love of God. None of you said that one. You know who would have said this one? The girl who put her hand in the air and volunteered to fast, even if the Torah hadn't dropped. But all right, so the love of God, which ahavat Hashem. So Rambam doesn't come up with this idea himself. He pulls it out of the Torah. And in fact, we said this earlier, this mitzvah, ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha. You will love the Lord your God with all your mind, with all your heart, with all your strength. This is the foundation of everything else. There is a problem, though, with this mitzvah. If you have even a little emotional intelligence, how can the Torah command you to feel love? And you will love the Lord your God? Like, you couldn't command somebody to love, a stranger they'd never met before. How are you going to command somebody to love an invisible, formless, unapproachable, unnameable? I mean, in the Jewish tradition, you can't even say God's name. How are you going to love that? And so this actually gets to a very important, critical way of understanding Judaism. It's actually not really about how you feel. Love is not about your feelings. Love is about what you do. Love is about what you do to demonstrate that feeling. And so Rambam has some suggestions, right? He says, in order to love God, you have to pay attention, right? You have to look around the world. He says, go touch grass. Okay, he didn't exactly say that, but he did say, marvel at the world around you. Do what Moses does at the burning bush. Stop. Look. Look more deeply. Right? We're so not used to this anymore because in a moment of having a little bit of free time or free space, we just reach for an object that will distract us from feeling a little bit of openness or attention that we might actually be able to devote to interrogating the awesomeness of the world in front of us, looking at a tree and actually wondering, how does it know when to shed its leaves in the fall? How does it know? And then how does it know when the right time is in the spring for those leaves to come back onto the trees? How does my body know to breathe without me telling it to? Right? Rabbi Eugene Borowitz talked about having surgery, and it was after the surgery, the way that they would know if it had worked is if he would be able to go to the bathroom afterward. And he said, for the first time in my life, I actually said hallelujah for going to the bathroom. Guess what? Jews have a blessing for that. Because if you pay attention to your functioning body, it's a freaking miracle, right? So Rambam says that if we pay this kind of holistic, focused attention to the world around us, we cannot help but be overwhelmed by, obsessed by the designer of all of this beauty. And he says, and that kind of holistic full body love, that it's comparable to the obsession you would have with a person you were in love with, except it's not a person, it's God, just walking around the world just in awe, or whatever you want to call it, the great mystery, Gaia, the force, everybody has their pet ways of referring to that presence that's larger than all of ourselves. But that overwhelming love is a mitzvah. It's not just a nice to have, it's a gotta have. For Maimonides, it's the most important commandment. So take a moment now, and I want you to give yourself a grade. On a scale of 1 to 5, the grade you would give yourself for this mitzvah. 1 being, I haven't touched grass in years, or felt radical amazement. I don't even know what you're talking about. And 5 being, I am literally so God intoxicated I can barely walk straight. All right. It's a little vulnerable here, but think about it for a moment. Give yourself a grade. Put it up in the air. Yeah? Kids got some 4s in the back. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So this is really good personal accountability, today is, you can put your hands down. Today is Shabbat. I want to invite you to move a little more slowly, to go outside, to touch grass, to do something that inspires a little bit of wonder, and to allow that to be a portal into this mitzvah. We're not done, though, because Rabbi Akiva disagrees with the Rambam and says, no, you're wrong. That's not the most important mitzvah. The most important mitzvah is love your neighbor as yourself. He almost, of course he had a relationship with God, but that wasn't even close. Love your neighbor as yourself. Ve'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha, which sort of implies what the folk in the back said. Also, loving yourself, but loving your neighbor as yourself. And then it has, bye, Sammy. And then there's the companion mitzvah that goes with this, which is ve'ahavta et hager, love the stranger. And so what is important to know about these two different mitzvot is that they're actually not the same. The Torah doesn't repeat itself unless it is saying something different. So ve'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha, love your neighbor, has always been understood, as Jews read the text, as loving your fellow Jew. Ve'ahavta et hager has always been understood as loving your fellow non-Jew. And it is important to state both of these. And if we were having a conversation over lunch, which I invite you to, or we were, this were more of a class, we could actually really, dig into this. Why? Why the distinction? And I want to just ask, is there, for my fellow Jews in the room, has there ever been a time when you have found it challenging to love your fellow Jews? And if there is nervous laughter in the room, it's because everyone in this room has blocked somebody on Facebook because they did not want to see what they were posting about, something that they care deeply about as a Jew. A fellow Jew. I do not want to see that. I don't want to think about that, right? I don't want to think about that person or the people, my people, who hold those opinions, who feel those things. Out of sight, out of mind. Well, the Torah says, you gotta love them. We gotta love each other. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everything, but that does mean when somebody gets sick, you put down your differences and you visit them in the hospital. Or if you know somebody's taking care of somebody who's in the hospital, you bring them food, you take care of them. It means that you put down your differences and you dance at their wedding, you sing at their simcha. You show up at the funeral. You show up at the shiva. You don't let all of the differences that, as it turns out, yes, they're important. Of course they're important. But the most important thing is love. Okay? And then what happens? Because as it turns out, there's that. There's what we just talked about, but as we know from psychology, and often from our own life, we do tend to innately have empathy for and love for people who look like us, or talk like us, or worship like us, right? That's just, it's often how human beings are built or socialized. And so the Torah needs to say, Ve'ahavta et hager, you will love the stranger. Because there are going to be people who don't look like you or pray like you, who you've also got to love. And that love, again, is transcending and despite all the differences that may exist, and requires us to show up, to give tzedakah, to advocate, right? Even if we don't know them. And importantly, don't feel an ounce of love, because it's not about how we feel. It's about what we do. So, I want to give a shout out. I don't think he's in the room here, but part of loving your people, I wanted to go back to this. Part of loving our fellow Jews is something called tochacha, which means loving critique. And I wanted to offer this because sometimes, you have to choose your battles when you do this, but right before the mitzvah about loving your neighbor as yourself, there is a mitzvah to offer loving critique. And those things are related. And so I want to give a loving shout out to a particular Mishkan teen who this week practiced the mitzvah of tochacha. So instead of, when feeling a little bit activated, a little bit upset about something, instead of spreading rumors and negative vibes, sat down and composed an email that began and ended with the premise of positive intent and mutual care. If we're having this conversation, it's because we actually love each other. But there are some things I need to say. And then sent the email, and we received it in the spirit in which it was sent, which was love and the desire to heal something that felt a little bit broken. And I have to tell you, and all of us probably know this, when you receive critical feedback in a way that is caring and loving, it's actually much easier to hear, right? You're much less defensive. When you receive critical feedback in a way that just turns you into an enemy, you did something wrong, our defenses go right up. Makes it very hard to hear that. But the Jewish tradition really wants there to be healing inside of our people. And of course, you can extrapolate this to any relationship you have, but you've got to start close to home. All right, honest question. Scale of 1 to 5. How well do you practice the mitzvah of loving your neighbor? Your fellow, the person in your community. We'll get to stranger in a minute. All right. I love how the folks in the back are like holding them up way high, and up here people are a little more hesitant. All right. In the back we've got some 4s and 5s. My God. All right. You guys are very spiritual people. We got some 3s, got a 1. All right, hands down. Is it any different for strangers? How do you feel on the scale of loving strangers? Incredible. I mean, I do have to say it's been very powerful in our community over the past few weeks here in Chicago as we, and our Jewish community, but people all over Chicago have rallied for people who are not in their particular religious community or neighborhood, but have shown up to stand outside of schools and patronize restaurants and go into neighborhoods where Latino brothers and sisters are being snatched off the street and being harassed and treated with utter cruelty, and have shown up for strangers. This is what the Torah is talking about. And we do this, again, not because we know them or love them on a personal level, but because it's what we would hope they would do for us if we were in their shoes. And people have done for us and our families in cases throughout history. So you can keep the strictest form of kosher. You can keep Shomer Shabbat all day and all night. And if you do not do the actions, the behaviors that demonstrate love of God, of your own people, of people who are not your people, you are missing the whole point. This is what the tradition wants us to know. today and all days. And so I'm going to close with this. Since you talked about numbers, Ben, I want to share with you one of my favorite little bits of gematria, which is Jewish numerology. So God's name, God's ineffable name, Yud, He, Vav, He. You have a number for every Hebrew letter. That's where Jewish numerology starts. And so if you add up the letters in God's name, 10, 5, 6, 5, you get 26. And if you add up the value of the word love, ahava, aleph, bet or vet, aleph, hey, bet, hey, you get 1, 5, 2, and 5, which is 13. Isn't that interesting? And so when we say the Shema, which we did about an hour ago, it's preceded, the Shema being the affirmation of God's oneness. God, Yud, He, Vav, He, 26. It is preceded by that prayer, Ahava Rabbah. If you were in the room, I told you, pay attention to it. We're going to come back to that. It's preceded by a prayer for the love we receive from our parents, from our tradition, from our lineage, from our teachers, all the love we receive. And then what comes after the Shema? Ve'ahavta, and you will love. In your home, on your way, when you lie down and when you rise up, you will see through the lens of love. You will practice love. Love in, love out. 13, 13. That's what it is to know God. That's what it is to live a godly life. That's the whole thing. So this is important because not everybody can decipher the mysteries of the universe in a blade of grass, although it would be nice. But everybody can serve a shift at a food pantry. Right? Not everybody can or wants to keep strictly kosher or Shabbat, but we all can show up at a shiva or at the funeral or bring somebody chicken soup after surgery. Right? Not everybody can get involved in building and sustaining the Jewish community in ways that many people in this room have. But we can be inspired by their example, and I think we could do a little bit better, all of us, and the world around us. And there is no shortage of need right now for us to practice this mitzvah in the world as the most basic expression of what it means to be Jewish. It is needed now more than ever, and I want to bless every single person in this room that we take this message to heart and take it on our way.